She is the chief meteorologist of WHIO's Storm Center 7 team, who will be presenting right now. Very soon.
Hello everybody, good morning.
Good morning.
Thank you all for coming here. I want to thank Josh and the Meteorology Club here at OSU for asking me to present today. I've been to this event several times in the past, and I always found it interesting to hear all the different topics. As a meteorologist and a lover of science, it's exciting to hear new things that I perhaps didn't know before. As Josh mentioned, today I'm going to be talking about the Memorial Day tornado outbreak. And there are two other speakers today that are going to be talking about the same exact thing. Brian Wood from Assurant will be coming up after me, and then later on Andy Hatzos from the National Weather Service. We sat down, the three of us, to communicate what each one of us were going to talk about, to make sure that we could have a full, comprehensive conversation about what happened that day, and make sure that each conversation is going to be different and more interesting than the one before. I want to start out by seeing how many of you, by a raise of hands, had been impacted by the outbreak that happened in southwestern Ohio on Memorial Day this year. Okay, so it looks like maybe 25% of you are familiar with it. Raise of hands of people that know about this event but not necessarily live there. Okay, good. So this is going to be a great conversation that most of you know what happened. And I wanted to start out letting you know more about me. I'm the chief meteorologist at Channel 7. I was promoted to chief in November. I've worked for this company for now 7.5 years. So leading up to this event, I've worked in Dayton, Ohio for 6 years. It was a big responsibility and a big task to take to lead the team. Little did I know that this was what was going to be what I would have to deal with just a few months later. Now, across the state, and I don't know the exact number, Andy, 20 tornadoes? 21 across the state. I had to deal with 15 of those. And it wasn't until the days, even maybe a week later, that we found out the exact number of tornadoes that happened. And to be quite honest, that night when I left work after this happened, I could say positively that there were at least 4, which was a big deal for us in the Miami Valley. We don't usually get that number of tornadoes, nor do we see the caliber where we could see debris signatures on radar. So I knew then it was epic. Did not know it was this epic until the Weather Service could get outside and really take a look at the damage path and everything. So starting out here with this first slide that I'm showing you is giving you red dot locations of where the tornadoes occurred in my viewing area. And I cover areas just south of Lima all the way into the northern suburbs of Cincinnati. The only one that's not pictured here is Uniopolis, which was an EF0. But notice the range of strengths of tornadoes that we had. To have an EF3 tornado in our viewing area is not, again, typical for us. We usually see those EF0s, those EF1s, and occasional EF2. But then also to get past that and to have an EF4 tornado is something that you would see more in the Oklahoma area. So this was by far a big event. And I just wanted to set it up there and let you see where it all goes from here. Here is a rundown of the times that all of these tornadoes started and when they ended, along with the strength of the winds that were estimated by the National Weather Service and the category, which you can see right down the center of your screen. I've highlighted a few of them because they're not only important to me, but I think important to telling the story. Notice the West Milton one. That's the first one that I highlight, the EF3 there. That's not the first EF3. You can see right before that, Salina was impacted by an EF3 tornado. But at 10:25, that tornado, for me personally, is the turning point of the night. That is when I go from okay, this is crazy, to this is serious, and I can tell we are in for a very, very long night. You'll also see 10:25 to 10:44, within that time frame, the next one down, which I did not highlight, there's another tornado that develops. 10:41, the one in Brookville, the main one, begins in northern Montgomery County. So you can see within just minutes you have 3 tornadoes, 3 significant tornadoes occurring. Then look at this one, Brookville, on the ground for 32 minutes, an EF4 tornado at its highest wind strength. In that time frame, you have 1, 2, 3, 4 other tornadoes that occur. Multiple of those on the ground at the same time. So think about me. This is what I'm going through. I knew the Salina one was a tornado, saw the debris signature. West Milton one, saw the debris signature. Now Brookville is on the ground, or that massive tornado, debris signature bigger than any of the others. My anxiety level is rising, my emotions are rising, and all of this is happening at the same time, and feeling the need to choose. Who am I going to focus in on? And there is the bouncing back and forth of trying to keep up with all of the warnings that Andy Hatsos is issuing, and he's going to talk more about that, but keeping up with that. And my computer is pinging, it's saying more warnings, updates, all of this is happening, and I know that this is going through my main county, Montgomery County. There are thousands of people that live right there. Thousands of people that potentially could be injured or dying. This is what I'm going through at this point in time. We're going to get back to that. I want to go back just 2 weeks before this event. Fortunately, my company, the parent company, Cox Media Group, has stations all across the country. And we do annually our own little conference where we learn different things about forecasting and how to learn. And you kind of have to do this as a meteorologist. There's always learning that you need to do. So if you look here in the photo, that's me right there, who's standing in the middle. That's from a gentleman that works for the Storm Prediction Center in Oklahoma. And in this conversation, we're talking about a lot of different things. One, we did a case study about a long track tornado that went through portions of Alabama and Georgia. So I'm learning about long track tornadoes. I'm also learning about reading debris signatures. And if you're not familiar with debris signatures, this is a product that we call correlation coefficient. And when you have large tornadoes on the ground, it creates this signature, this donut hole, which clearly shows you that there are non-meteorological items flying through the air. It's taking out all of the precipitation, all of the hail, and saying, you know what, this object is more long than it is wide. That is not normal, and it should not be there. So that's how we know that there's a debris signature. Do we see this in the Miami Valley? Not like that, not normally. That's what I'm seeing on the night of Memorial Day. Then I'm also learning about, studying about how high the debris is going up in the sky, and how high it is might infer the strength of the tornado itself. How high is the debris getting lofted? It's going to have to be a pretty powerful tornado to do that. In that picture though, up there, this is probably the most significant thing and the most key thing that led me into knowing what was going to be happening that night. That, from the Storm Prediction Center, is their daily tornado climatology. And if you're savvy with the Storm Prediction Center, you may have come across this on their main page. And they break down each type of severe parameter, from hail to winds to tornado. Each and every day there's a climatology of a percentage of a chance, if conditions are favorable, that would happen on that day within a 25-mile radius. So, on Memorial Day, if ingredients are favorable, we have in the Miami Valley anywhere between a 0.4 to a 0.6% chance of a tornado occurring. Does not sound like a lot. You're like, oh, that's not even 1%, that's not even 0.5% for most of us. But it's only part of the equation. Then you have to factor in, okay, the ingredients are here. And the Storm Prediction Center that day, initially, this is later on, talking about tornado threat, This was closer to the event because eventually it was originally expected to be stronger off to our north and west. But as we got later into the day, and we're talking here, this is issued 2, 3 o'clock maybe in the afternoon, that there's a 5% chance of a tornado in the Miami Valley. Again, you may be thinking, that's 5%. That's 5%. That means that's not going to happen. If I told you you had a 5% chance to win the lottery that day, you'd be like, why would I even play, right? But here's what that means. That means, because of the climatology of the day, we are 12.5 times more likely to have a tornado. Whoa, that's a big deal. 12.5 times more likely. Said that to Dante Jones as we were getting into the afternoon. So here's the severe outlooks that come from the Storm Prediction Center. This is just an hour by hour of what's happening. At 1:50 in the afternoon, remember I mentioned that threat for tornadoes? North and west. And Andy's going to talk more about the ingredients leading up to it. But these are things that I'm looking at as a meteorologist. 4:57. Okay, that warm front's lifting northward. Ingredients are increasing across the Miami Valley. That threat is inching closer. 6:30. Game on, people. Tornado threat now in the Miami Valley, and that only intensifies further at 9:08. Well, I'm already on air at this point. We already have a tornado warning that's been issued, and we are smack dab in the bullseye of what is going to be the biggest outbreak the Miami Valley has ever had. So, I'm in between shows. My newscast ended at 6:30. The tornado threat was to my west for the most part. How am I going to let people know? So there we go. This is, the timestamp on this is 4:51. This is from the Storm Prediction Center showing the risk for severe weather. So I'm telling people stay alert. This is on Twitter. Then, remember why I just showed you this a few minutes ago? This is at 6:38. Strong storms this evening may cause damaging winds and hail. Tornado threat has also increased across the Miami Valley. Then we get to 8 o'clock. I know it's serious at this point. Watching closely, several tornado-warned storms are located to our west. I'm watching one in particular storm near Muncie, Indiana as it approaches. Then at 8:30, we get the tornado watch. That's pretty much the last thing I send out. There might be a couple other things, there's some emails, but at this point I'm prepping the news director, I'm prepping the directors, I'm prepping Cheryl McHenry, who's my anchor. This is happening soon. 9 o'clock, that's my first cut in. We have 2 warnings. I cover Randolph County and Wayne, Indiana as well. We have a severe thunderstorm warning and a tornado warning issued, so immediately I'm on air and everybody knows that there's something going on. I don't know if this is going to play, but if it loads, it may. This, remember that turning point? West Milton? This is that turning point. Hold on. Wait for it. Okay, maybe not. I'll give you a recap. I cry on air.
I remember that.
Yeah. Thank you. So at this point in time, I see the debris signature in West Milton and I become emotional. And it just overtakes me. And maybe it'll play. There we go. I'll let it speak for itself.
Getting that indication that debris is on the ground now with this twister. So there's Ludlow Falls. We're talking right now at State Route 55 towards Ludlow Falls, West Milton. You're just on the south side of this. You need to be in your safe spot, but quite possible that this storm is going to pass to your north. Does not look like you're going to have a direct hit, but Ludlow Falls right now, I'm serious, get to your safe spot. You need to be in the lowest interior part of a sturdy structure. Get there now. This is a dangerous situation that has been ongoing. I'm sorry, getting choked. It's okay. And I don't advise anybody with kids, get the bike helmets on them, put them in the basement, put the helmets on them. You know, this is not a time to think about anything looking silly. Please stay safe.
This is a very serious situation, as McCall is pointing out, so we want everyone in our viewing area, we care about you, we want you to be safe tonight. So if you're listening on the radio, if you're watching on your computer, please stay safe. Get to where you need to be. You've heard it before. Get in the basement, get in the bathtub, cover yourself if you don't have a basement, be in an interior room, and stay safe because we've got some serious concerns out here. There's a tornado out there.
Yeah, that's correct. I'm back with you guys. Sorry about that. Just getting a little tripped up. So Ludlow Falls, you're in the path of this storm. We're talking about areas just north of West Milton. This is near the Kessler area. And this storm has had indications of being...
Okay. We're humans too. Even watching that video, I'm feeling emotional because I remember how that felt. To feel that you're the only person that may be saving a life and not knowing if people are listening or taking you seriously. It's the scariest thing and scariest feeling to ever feel. What I found out later, and before later, in my job and in my profession, it's implied that you do not get emotional. You're not supposed to get emotional. I don't know if it's just that I'm a mom and my hormones are raging, but you know what? I'm caring about everybody. And I found out later that there were a lot of people that said it wasn't until that point when they heard me get so upset, and even Cheryl, to see Cheryl get choked up, they knew, you know what? This is unlike any other event. That was around 10:27. 10:50. Andy remembers this. Tornado emergency is issued. The highest warning you can give for a tornado. I've never heard of a tornado emergency in our area. I would learn later that maybe only the second time the Weather Service has ever issued one. So I know, though, the threat that comes with an emergency and being able to get that information across. Here's what it looked like on radar. This is 1052 for you. And if you don't know what this is velocity. And again, Kirsty Zontini, who's here and works with me, remembers waking up because she was sleeping. She was going to join me a little bit later on in the evening. We knew there were tornado threats, not to the caliber we expected, but seeing that on radar is very scary. Very, very, very scary. And you may notice here, this is a little bit behind the scenes. This is what I look like on air. As I'm looking down at my computers there, which you can't tell, it just looks as, what is she looking at? Well, I'm looking at this. This is a 4-panel of all the different things that are happening in the environment at that specific point. Upper left-hand corner, yep, there's the hook echo, we can see it. That's your radar signature. This is our debris signature. You can see the blue and the clutter there that's indicating that there's debris. Then of course we have our velocity, which is signifying net rotation, and then this is another product we call NROT, which is another product that takes everything else and says, hey, something's spinning. And clearly that's happening there. So I am looking at this tool not only in that moment, but throughout the entire event. So there's a lot of me looking down because I'm trying to see what's happening and what's changing and getting a deeper look at what's taking place. This is a slice of that debris signature that we talked about a little bit earlier on. And you can see debris is hitting up around 20,000 feet. That's just another indication of how powerful this tornado is. At that time, I cannot necessarily analyze the strength of the tornado, but I know it's pretty strong. So recap. Let's just show this again. I wanted to just show you all of this that happened again, so that I can show you what it looked like the day after. This is Brookville, Ohio. This was just a couple miles from where the EF4 began. This is in Terrace Park. You can see it looks as though a bomb just exploded in this neighborhood. I knew, and when I was getting emotional, I knew this is what was happening. I could visualize it. I've learned these things. I learned when I see that on radar, this is what it will look like the next day. This looks like there should be dozens of people dead, injured. The fear of knowing that this was what was happening and what people were going to wake up the next to is unbelievable. This is drone footage of the path of that EF4. It begins in Harrison Township, heads towards Northridge and Old North Dayton. And from above, you can see just how wide this tornado was. And this doesn't even capture how wide it was. This is just a focused in section of this path. And watch as it rips across this neighborhood, very mature trees, broken right at the base. It moves into this shopping plaza. Coming up in the upper left-hand corner of your screen, that's a dollar store. Right next to it was a business called The Living Room. Gone. Just imagine if people were inside. This continues across, takes out these trees, and I'm going to let this go because I think that what is incredible about what happens next is that the tornado itself moves over Interstate 75. 75 people. Do you know how many cars were on the road? There was a family traveling to Georgia that their car got speared through the back by a steel beam, missing their daughter by inches as it tore through. They had no idea that it was coming. It was dark out. The size of this storm, you wouldn't even be able to tell where the edges were. It moves across, hits the Dayton Hotel, moves right into this neighborhood, takes out, this is a gas station, takes the gas station out, just shreds this neighborhood. Now we have to get to the part we were all hoping wouldn't happen. The next morning, waiting for the shoe to drop, Dale Hanna, a Salina resident, sleeping in his bed, takes his hearing aids out, is completely unaware that an EF3 tornado is moving right into his neighborhood. Unfortunately, a car gets picked up, thrown right into his bedroom on top of him while he's sleeping. The only good thing that you could possibly say about it is maybe he was completely unaware, blissfully sleeping, and never felt a thing. But that doesn't help me sleep at night. This man had a beautiful Memorial Day with his friends and his family, went to bed, and did not wake up the next day. He was the only verified death from the tornado. But there's another woman, Kathy Claiborne. She went walking out of her house that night. She has dementia. She can get lost. She did get lost. It was days later that people found her underneath tornado debris. It's unclear, from what happened that night, if she was directly killed by the tornado, or she was close to a river or stream. Did she fall in? We don't know if the tornado is what actually killed her, but I'm feeling pretty confident that that's what happened. If she was home with her husband who was there looking for her, she would be alive today. So, my job is to get out there and see what happened. I can't just stay there behind the lens and talk about it and then not connect with the people that this impacted. So it was not the next day, but the day after, Kirsty and I went out to check out the damage. So this is in Trotwood. This is in Shiloh Garden Springs. And this neighborhood, much like the neighborhoods that I showed you in Brookville and over in Northridge and Old North Dayton, was just torn apart. All of the trees were knocked over, roofs ripped off. You can see the tarp on the back of that on this house. And this is 2 days later. People are out there. They're already trying to clean up, and they did a great job. I've never seen people come together as much as they did on that day. High schools were coming in, sawing. The Trotwood High School football players were in Trotwood cutting down trees of their favorite teacher. These are a few people that we got to talk with on our trek through the Miami Valley. This is also in Trotwood, the same neighborhood. And Kirsty and I got to talk to these people here that told us that the night of the tornado, they knew the wind was picking up, and then it went dead silent. And this woman here that Kirsty's talking to said it was just bang, 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 bang. And then all of a sudden it hit them. So she could hear all the trees getting ripped apart as this tornado came right through her neighborhood. This is on Troy Street in Old North Dayton. That's Brian Wood. He'll be coming up right after me. Brian is a very good friend of mine that I actually met here very first time at this symposium. And he works for Assurant, and he has done a lot of work with going to places that have been impacted by natural disasters and talking about structures of buildings and how this tornado itself ripped apart the buildings in this part of Old North Dayton. And Kirsty and I host a podcast. So this day we were recording our podcast with Brian and getting his assessment just a couple days after this tornado hitting about what came through here and how those buildings handled the storm. And a lot of these buildings, this is Old North Dayton, it gets its name because it's Old North Dayton. A lot of these houses are not structurally sound. More than 60 residents in that area no longer live there. It's a rental community for the most part. Then it comes to giving back. My job is a lot of things. This was probably my favorite part. Get past the really negative thing. Let's talk about giving back to the people that could really use it. And my company has been really great with donating back to our community as well. And I was excited to be at 2 check presentations. We donated over $100,000 back to the community, but each, the food bank, as well as the Red Cross, we gave $40,000 for tornado relief efforts. Then, let's raise some money. This is me at the Dayton Strong Benefit Concert down at Riverscape Metro Park. We had tons of performances there. I was the MC of the event to help raise money to give back to Dayton. There were things from t-shirts to people just donating it and enjoying the music. Some people were just impacted and wanted a nice night. And if that's all I could give you, then that was wonderful. This was on North Dixie Drive at the Dixie Drive-In. Look at all the food here. Got up real early. It was a super hot day that day. And bagged non-perishable items. And cars would pull up through the drive-in, one of which is right there, and we would put the food in their car. As much food as they wanted. It wasn't like, oh, you just get a few oranges. If you need 5 bags of oranges, you get 5 bags of oranges. Months later, I partnered up with a high school classmate of mine, and I'm from originally the state of New York, and he created this nonprofit called Pay Away the Layaway, and you may have heard of it before. But he donated $30,000, and we went to Burlington Coat Factory in Dayton and paid off $30,000 worth of layaway for people. And things that they were buying at Burlington, their clothes, jackets that they needed. So to give back and just relieve that stress for some people, and they could just use that money for something else, was a really great feeling. Then we're coming up on the 6-month mark of the tornadoes. And a lot had happened since then. We had the tornado outbreak, and less than a month and a half later, we had a mass shooting in downtown Dayton. It was a very hard year for us. The shooting, we all felt that, and the families still feel that. The tornado victims kind of got put on the back burner. That's the way this industry is. What is the new, more shocking thing that makes you forget about the last shocking thing you felt so bad about? And I knew that people were light to that. And of course I can't hit all 15 tornadoes. So teamed up with a couple of guys that work for the Dayton Daily News to walk the entire 20-mile path of the EF4 tornado, to hear the stories of the people and how they're recovering 6 months later. So in this photo here, this is Chris Stewart and this is Josh Schweiger, both veteran reporters for the Dayton Daily News. And what was great about this partnership is that in television, you only get a certain number of minutes to tell your story. When you have a newspaper, they can do these long exposés and in-depth coverage. So I had the job of getting the sound, the people's words, the visuals, and telling the story for people to see and hear. But I can't get it all in just a few minutes. They were able to tell more stories, more lengthy stories, and you could go and follow up with them. So that was the premise of the project going in. We didn't really know how this was all going to go. First day, we head to Brookville. Remember that video I showed you? This is what it looks like now in that same neighborhood. This is Terrace Park. This house, clearly. This one and the one right next to it. Those people were hit by a tornado. Someone came in and assessed the homes, and they have not been back. Who knows why? Insurance? They just didn't want to bear to see it anymore. I don't know. I don't know why they didn't come back. We happened to be there when Ed Kirkland and his daughter showed up. This is where their home was. It's just a slab now. Ed told us that his daughter there showed up a few minutes before the tornado hit. They ran into the center of their home. They don't have a basement, obviously. It was not a two-story home. It was just a one-level ranch, much like that one across the street. They have lived in this community their whole lives. The home gets hit by the tornado. A wall hits his youngest daughter in the head and knocks her out. She, to this day, still has PTSD. They had their insurance guy come out the next day. They're ready to give him the money. But they have decided that they're going to move. Because you know what? For them, they could rebuild their house. But across the street, every time they walk out the door, that's what they see. And I saw this time and time again in neighborhoods. There are some houses that look beautiful and they're being rebuilt, and then right next door, that's what it looks like. And for Ed and his family, that's too hard. That's too much of a reminder every single day to walk outside and see that, and not knowing when it's going to be put back together. What they knew is not ever going to be that way again. Even if every single home in that neighborhood gets rebuilt, the trees look like that. They're not lush, they're not beautiful. This neighborhood, they told me there were a ton of trees. They're all gone. Found out some data, 70% of that subdivision was destroyed or severely damaged. Then we go to Trotwood. Well, I knew Shiloh Gardens was hit hard, so you know what? Let's go back 6 months later and see what happened. This is a home that we went to in October. Remember, the tornado was on Memorial Day. This was the first day they were starting to work on this house. Lovey was the name of the woman who lived here. Her insurance was great, gave her a great apartment in downtown Dayton, but because of a backlog of contractors, they haven't been able to get there and fix up her house. She has this big hole in her roof that obviously at one point was tarped, but with months of rain and other storms that came through, the tarp has fallen in. Her whole house filled with insulation, soggy, smelly, disgusting. I don't know if she's moved back in. My hope is to get there, hopefully by the year anniversary, and Lovey has her home back. But one interesting thing that Lovey told me is that when she moved out of here, she put all her clothes in a storage unit somewhere, but she moved in the summertime. So she had all her summer clothes. And now we were in October and it was starting to get cold again. And she didn't have any winter clothes. She doesn't want to go buy a ton because she has a ton in storage. And storage, all her clothes is buried back in the back of her storage, and she's not a young, spry lady. So she was dealing with that difficulty, things that you didn't think about until she said it. She thought she would have been home by then. Across the street from her, this is Makila Ben and her dog Champion. They ran into the bathroom when the tornado was approaching. She said she was watching us on the news, heard it, the bangs, ran in. The fan was making a noise as it came over. Makila survived the Xenia 74 tornado as well. She was in the basement of her aunt and uncle's house. Moved to Trotwood in April of this year. She said she wasn't even there a month. And then she gets hit by an EF4, or what would be an EF4. She said she feels blessed. I think she's the luckiest lady I've ever met and should play the lottery. But she also feels a little unlucky because sadly in our travels we have found not great contractors. And out front of her home she had a huge dumpster filled with all of the stuff from her house that this guy started to work on and just left there. So this gentleman, sweet man, was up on top of the tree cutting down all the bad pieces of the tree, and he was a totally different contractor and was doing it out of the kindness of his heart because it was just dangerous. So there were some good people. Tornado continues on. It moves into Harrison Township. This might have been visually the most breathtaking for me because this part of Harrison Township was filled with so many trees. And in fact, on the right-hand side of your screen, that is the Sinclair Park. Over 400 trees, nearly 200 years old, estimated, are gone. They don't expect, I believe, for that park to open up until 2021. Just across the street, you have the Stillwater River. So there's a Sinclair Park, there's a highway, the river, and then here, where all of these trees were taken out. There was a woman who lived in a home, which is just off camera, right about here. Doesn't look much different from here, but she lived there. And she said she just heard all the bangs and knew all the trees were gone. She was in high spirits and she moved back in. It's her brother's home that they fixed up. And she's trying to take light of it. She says now she can see the city lights. Before she couldn't see them, and now she can see the sunrise when the trees used to block that. So she's feeling high-spirited about it all. Then as we get into the Northridge area, this home was home to Connie and Rex. There's Connie, Rex. That's the shower, probably a bedroom. That leads into the kitchen. That's on the side of the house. Look at the refrigerator right there. That's right around here, looking in. This is the front of the home. Now, Connie made it to the basement in time. Rex barely got into the stairs when the tornado hit. Fortunately, they're both okay. What Rex said was Connie, normally, most nights, falls asleep on the couch right there. But for some reason that night, she was up. I think she was watching some television show. And was up, fortunately, when that tornado came in. So they survived. But the home was still under the name, the deed was under the name of her brother that deceased that year. So because of that, it was too difficult for them to figure everything out with the insurance. She did not get it legally put into her name before the tornado hit. So they had to leave there and find themselves a new home to live in, purchase a new home. I do not know what they have to do financially to get rid of that home. Then there's Old North Baden. This was November. I took this photo. Don't think they're coming back. This is the same area where about 60 residents have left. Not only is it because most of them were rental properties, but more so, Grocery Lane, which is the only supermarket in that area is gone. And there is no, I talked to the neighborhood association guy, no talks of rebuilding at this point. So that leads to a food desert. And the old North Dayton president of the neighborhood association told me that there are so many people in this neighborhood that do not have transportation. So that grocery store was their grocery store. They have the money to buy food, but do not have a place to buy it. So, to try and help that situation out, Matthew Tepper, the president of the association, has created a little food pantry and is working on creating some transportation bus-wise to perhaps help people get to other grocery stores. So that's very sad to me to think, in this day and age, that you could have people that have money to buy food, but cannot go and get it for themselves. Then our trip ends in the Riverside area, and this is where the EF4 has weakened and is just about to dissipate. Before, actually, if you look at the time, there may have been 2 tornadoes on the ground at the same time based on the damage path, but would cross 75 and go into Beaver Creek as an EF3. But this is the tail end of that big 20-mile path. This is Peter, and he was in his home when the tornado hit, and it's a little bungalow, no basement, barely a foundation at all. Says he was watching me on Channel 7, his fiance and him ran into the bathroom. And the bathroom is really small, so she's in the tub, he's sitting on the toilet. He says the floor starts waving up and down, and he can feel it as he's sitting on the toilet. Then he hears this loud bang. It's this piece of wood that pierces through the side of his home. He comes out after the sounds dissipate and he feels that it's safe enough to come out. He says the inside of his house looks like a snow globe. The insulation and the leaves are just blowing through his house, just floating. He's thankful that he survived, but he has been dealing with some mental issues, some PTSD from that day as well. And his biggest problem was thinking that he put his fiancée in a situation that could have killed her. Sounds irrational, right? Because who's the thinking that you're gonna have a powerful tornado smack your home? It happens, obviously, we talk about it. But it's not this gentleman's fault. But he felt the guilt that his fiancée could have possibly died because it was in a home that wasn't structurally up to necessarily handle that type of a tornado. So this is where I'm going to wrap up my talk. We have about 5 minutes for you guys to ask some questions. But if you do want to reach out to me and you want to hear a little bit more about that night and what has happened since then, I am hoping to have a roundup again as we get back into May and cover this once again to see where people are as we get towards Memorial Day. But my talk, while not so sciencey, I wanted you all to understand what it's like to be a meteorologist in this type of event. My team was amazing. I started out solo. Meteorologist Dante Jones did join me, and then eventually Kirsty came in to give me some relief so I could go home and try to sleep. And we have been nonstop working on this and making sure that we reach out to the people that were impacted. Coming up in a few minutes, you're going to hear from Brian, who's going to talk more about insurance, and really it's more than just the tornadoes. And then later on, you'll hear the sciencey side and what it took to have the strength to issue so many warnings that night and the tornado emergency. So I'll take some questions now. Unfortunately, I will not be here for the panel later, so this might be your only time to ask a question to me. So, anybody?
McCall, you're relatively young for broadcast meteorologist still. This may happen 1 or 2 more times in your career. Have you thought about how that might affect you? You're mentally prepared to go through this a couple more times?
I think that I feel stronger and more prepared if I had to go through something like this again. I do not obviously want to ever go through this again, nor do I want anybody else to. But I think that it has given me the tools to handle it better and to know where we may be lacking. And when it comes down to the science, knowing that day of what the expectation to happen, I had no reference point back to say, this is what conditions are like and this is what will happen. Now, moving forward, I might be able to see those signals a little bit sooner and be able to get those warnings out and that information out a lot quicker than this time around.
One of your colleagues famously lashed out against people who criticized interrupting programming for tornado warnings. I wonder about how you experienced that and your reaction to what your colleague did.
I totally get why. Because in our job and in our industry, we constantly get backlash from people upset when we cut into the football games or into their favorite programming. So I understand the frustration. Fortunately, I did not have a big, huge program that was on my station at that time, so I didn't feel that backlash. Each person is going to handle it in their own way. He went one way, I cried. So, I mean, not throwing stones.
You said the West Milton one was the one that was the turning point for you that night. How long did it take you to realize that the EF4 was as bad as it was?
I'd say it felt like forever in my mind, but it was probably about 30 seconds. Because I'm, trying to wrap my head around everything that's happening, and I'm looking at West Milton, and then I travel not even 30 miles south, and it almost tricks your brain to be like, that's not real. There's no way that's real. That's real. This is not good. So it was probably very quick, but to me felt like an eternity.
Was there any video of any of the tornadoes now?
There was one video that we wound up seeing a few months later with a person that was driving near 75, and just with a lightning flash you could see it just so quickly, but that was the only video that I've seen, and it's because it was nighttime. So most people, unless, there might have been people that have captured it and didn't know, because unless you get it in that split second, you're not going to see it.
First of all, I want to thank you personally as someone who grew up in Dayton for what you did that night to keep my family, friends safe back in Dayton. I had heard the reports that there were tornado sirens in the city of Dayton that didn't go off, and I wanted to know your thoughts about getting either too much reliance on media or trying to get the word out through different channels and avenues, and whether or not you think that tornado sirens are no longer effective.
Sirens have one purpose, and the purpose of it is to alert people outside. And when it comes to sirens, unless you're out there, chances of you hearing them are slim to none. And they're very, very expensive to not only build, but to maintain. And there is a much better effective way to get warnings out, and in this day and age everybody has a cell phone, or if you don't have one you can have a weather radio. I think there is a purpose for sirens. I honestly have had this conversation before. Take this event and put it at 5 o'clock in the afternoon on Memorial Day when people are at picnics, playing football outside. Sirens, this conversation might be different. People might be pushing to spend that money to have more sirens, but that's not how this panned out. They do work, but I don't necessarily know if they are as effective as having a cell phone that can warn you.
One thing I noticed with your particular station is that your non-meteorologists that are on the team seem to be much more knowledgeable about meteorology than other stations in the area. So I want to know what are some things that you folks do behind the scenes to really get your anchors and your field personnel really knowledgeable with things that I wouldn't expect a non-professional meteorologist to know about.
Well, everybody on my team I consider a meteorologist. When you're talking technically and you're saying, well, I went to school and I have a broadcast BS in meteorology, that's because I took calculus. And to be quite honest, I am not doing differential equations when I'm forecasting. So there are members on my team that may not have a BS in meteorology, but they studied the science of meteorology. And they have taken the exams and they have done the same training that I have from being in Dayton, Ohio and that. So every person on my team is up to the caliber and the knowledge of what I have, just may have a different title. So other than that, the schooling aspect, just making sure that each one of us are having a conversation on a daily basis. We are consistently passing the baton off. No one is ever walking in not knowing what the last person thought. And teamwork is really a big part of it. And then again, going to these conferences and learning things. I didn't know before going to that conference about the tornado climatology. And that was just one clue that helped me on that day. Learning about debris signatures, just constantly wanting to learn.
That's about all the time we have, sorry.
That's okay. Sorry, Brian.